All right, so as we have seen that planning a cost and estimating the cost are a part of the planning process group, and determining the budget is also a part of the planning process group. So let's start with determining the budget. So what do you mean by determine a budget? It's a process of aggregating the estimated cost of individual activities. So if you would have seen in the previous video, what we did is we estimated the cost at an activity level, not at a project level. Now there are various activities involved, right? For each of these activities, we tried to find out what will be our estimated cost. But to find out as to what is the entire budget of the project, we have to aggregate all these costs at an overall level. We have to take all the cost of the individual activities, combine it, and then add certain more reserves to it, understand what are going to be the complications and various steps. We'll take all that into consideration, and then we are going to determine our budgets. Yeah. All right. So the key benefit of this process is that it determines the cost baseline. We saw what the cost baseline is. So it is the process in which we identify the cost baseline against which the project performance can be monitored and controlled. So as a project manager, your job is always to monitor the baselines, right? And cost baseline, one of being one of the most important ones. So what are the inputs? So of course, when you are sitting and you're identifying what the budget is all about, you will need certain documents. The documents that you're going to refer is nothing what are known as the inputs. These are documents. You need the project management plan. At this point of time, some documents are already ready with you. Your cost management plan is ready. When did you make your cost management plan? In the planning the cost management process group. So you need your cost management plan. Your resource management plan is ready because you know how many people are going to work on your project, what are the kind of resources that you will need. It is not only people, but it is all about the other resources as well. Your warehouse, your raw materials, your machineries, all that is also a part of the resource management plan. Your scope baseline is already ready, right? If you see in the previous video, we've spoken about the scope baseline as well. Now the scope baseline also includes the project scope statement, the WBS and the WBS dictionary. So you need all these information to determine your overall budget. You need your project documents, right? So you have seen what is the difference between a project management plan and a project document. So project documents will have documents such as basis of estimation. On what basis are you saying that you need so much money? So that is what is something which is a part of the basis of estimates. Cost estimates, the one that you created at the time of estimating your cost at an activity level, your project schedule and your risk register. These are the documents which are part of the project document here. The business documents, you remember business document includes business case and the business management plan. Why business document is required here? Because it talks all about the money factor. What is the success factor of your project is a part of the business case and the business management plan. And of course the agreements, because where we are talking about an entire budget at an overall level, you will have to know what are the third parties involved, what are the various relationships or the agreements that you will have with various third parties. So and hence agreements are always an input while determining your budget. Of course, your EEFs on the OPAs. We've spoken about EEFs and OPAs n number of times. So that is also a part of your determining budget input document. Now these are the documents that you need for working on this process. You've taken all these documents. What are you going to do? You are going to do some processing on these documents. You will find out what are the tools and techniques. How are you going to do it? Through calling through experts. You can call experts. Experts can come. They are specialized in identifying different budgets. They will come and they can help you out. So the first tool and technique is your expert judgment. Then is cost aggregation. Now what do you mean by cost aggregation? Cost estimates are aggregated by work package in accordance with the WBS. The work package cost estimates are then aggregated for a higher component level of the WBS and ultimately for the entire project. So every activity is a part of the WBS and some of the other work package. You aggregate those activities at a work package level, then you aggregate it at an overall level, and then find out your complete budget of the project. Some data analysis tool, right? So when you have all the information available with you, you will need some data analysis tool. Some data analysis technique that can be used are reserve analysis. You can find out with the help of reserve analysis, which can establish the management reserves for the project. Management reserves are an amount of the project budget withheld for the management control purposes. Now there are two types of reserves. There's contingency reserves, there's management reserves. Contingency reserve is something that you will use as and when the risk occurs. The management reserve is a part of the management control. Now management can only use that reserve. You as a project manager cannot use, and it is not even a part of the cost baseline. Then historical information review, you can check how your previous projects have worked, what you have done, what has gone wrong, what has worked well on that. So reviewing historical information can assist in developing parametric estimates or analogous estimates. Funding limit reconciliation, the expenditure of the funds should be reconciled with any funding limits on the commitment of funds for the project. So assuming your project requires $1 million, but you will not need $1 million on day one. You will have to analyze and create a road path for it, that what amount is required at what stage. The variance between the funding limit and the planned expenditure will sometimes necessitate the rescheduling of the work to level out the rate of expenditures. It will not depend that, it will depend that in case if your project is delayed, your funding flow will also be delayed or has to be managed accordingly. Financing. Your financing entails acquiring funding for the project. It is common for long-term infrastructure, industrial and public sector projects to seek external sources of funds. If a fund is funded externally, the funding entity may have certain requirements that are required to be met. So financing is also an important tool and technique, because here you're talking about the entire project, right? So you have to accordingly manage that. So you have the documents, you've used certain tools and techniques, you've called experts, you've done some analysis, you've checked on the funding limit reconciliation, your financing, you have done all that as a part of the tool and technique. What is the output of determined budget? Your 1 mark question for your examination can be here is cost baseline. Cost baseline is an output of its determined budget. Please remember very clearly. The cost baseline is the approved version of the time-phased project budget. Understand, it's a time-phased project budget, excluding any management reserves. Always remember, and I told you this before as well, cost baseline will have a part of the contingency reserves, but not the management reserves. That's not a part of your cost baseline, and you do not have control over that. Cost estimates for the various project activity along with the contingency reserves for these activities are aggregated into the associated work package cost. Very important from your examination perspective. Management reserves are added to the cost baseline to produce the project budget. So there's a cost baseline, you add management reserves to that and you will get your entire budget of the project. This is how exactly it looks like. Okay, so when you start from here, there's an activity cost estimate. You add activity contingency reserves to that, which aggregates to a work package level. In your work package also you can add your contingency reserves. Now this becomes a part of your control account. Control account is like a section to it. From these control accounts, when you add all these control accounts, you get your cost baseline. You add management reserves to your cost baseline, and this is what is something known as the project budget. This is the overall budget of your project. Remember, this can be a 1 mark question for you in your examination as to management reserves is a part of the project budget or cost baseline. Okay, so it's a part of the project budget and not a part of the cost baseline. This is how the S diagram is being explained here. This is the thick line that you can see is the cost baseline. Your funding requirement. Remember, I was telling you that you will not need all the funds on day one. You will need certain on certain points, and then depending upon the various timeline is your requirement of the funding that will be managed within the cost baseline. This is something that is known as the expenditure, as to how is your actual expenditure happening. This is your cost baseline. This is what you had estimated. This is the actual expenditure that is happening. BAC, budget at completion. This is something which is known as your cost baseline. How much is the budget that you will need at the time of completion of the project is the cost baseline as the completion. When you add a management reserve to that, that becomes your project budget. Got that? Remember, and this is very important from all your calculation perspective also, from your understanding perspective also. Okay, another output of your determined budget is your project funding requirement. Remember, we were talking about that. The total funding requirement and periodic funding requirement as to how much do you need at what point of time is something that will be documented in this document. The cost baseline will include the projected expenditure plus anticipated liabilities. All that will be a part of the project funding requirement. The project documents get updated, your cost estimates, the project schedule, and the risk register now gets updated.